So first, let me start by saying that this is a huge effort that FAO launched to have the SOFA on food loss and waste. And I want to start by thanking all the people that is behind this report, which most of them are sitting here. So thank you so much to all the departments and all the researchers led by Andrea Cataneo, by Marco Sanchez, and by Jose Rosero from the Statistics Department. So thank you very much for all the hard work. So let me start with what we are trying to bring up in this report. As you know, we did enormous advocacy in the 2011 report. But what we want to do now is we want to provide better estimates and concrete estimates to be able to track over time. We believe that's central, and that's where we're looking at both food losses and food waste in a different way. Now, it's also important, and what we will raise in this report, that we need to keep improving. But that doesn't mean that we cannot start now in making changes and making action, which we already started in many cases because of the awareness raised in 2011. But we need to make a call to keep improving on this indicator and keep improving the quality of the data we collect. What is happening? There is a wide variability in food loss and waste, and you will see some of the estimates that we have. So FAO new estimates for losses are a big step towards action. Why? Because initially in 2011, 1/3 of food lost or wasted was reported by FAO. But it was an aggregate number, which creates significant awareness. But now we have an SDG, which is SDG target 12.3. And to be able to measure that SDG, we have created two indexes. One is the food loss index, which FAO is responsible. And the second one is the UN Food Waste Index, as was mentioned by the Director General, which UNEP is responsible. We are going to focus on the food loss index, although we are going to report information that we have been able to collect in terms of food waste. The food waste index from UNEP is still not ready, but the food loss index will be since today so that we can track the impact of what we are doing. So what is the difference, and what is the difference to the previous methodologies and where we are trying to bring the definition in a better and more clear way? Essentially, what used to happen is that we aggregate both food loss and waste. Now we are trying to have a differentiation between what is food loss and what is food waste. What we call food loss is everything from post-harvest up to including wholesale, before the retail. So from the post-harvest up to including wholesale markets, excluding retail. And what we will call food waste from now onwards is retail up to the consumer. Now, why we need to do this? Why it's so important to have these two indicators? Because we want to understand where the problem is. We want to know better where to resolve the problem. And when we combine both, it was not clear where the problem was and how we can track it. Now we know within the value chain where the post-harvest starts, why are the problems facing, and why this is happening. It could be that some of the measures to resolve the problems we are facing in the post-harvest part of the value chain come from the production side. But we need to know where it is. And on the waste side, we know that it's important to do policies which are targeting the consumers, policies that will allow us to avoid the waste, as it was clearly shown in the video. So again, two indexes, one from post-harvest up to the level, including the wholesaler, and the other one from the retail up to the consumer, which will be the concept of food waste that we are bringing up. Now, what do we know on these numbers? Globally, around 14% of the food produced is lost. The exact number is 13.8. So we simplify by saying it's 14% of losses, okay? Not losses and waste. Only of losses is globally 14%. But an FAO is custodian of this indicator. But again, there is significant regional variance. At the regional level, for example, estimates range from 5 to 6% in Australia and New Zealand to 20 to 21% in Central and Southern Asia, with numbers which are bigger also for Sub-Saharan Africa. But also it varies by commodity. So staple commodities have different levels of losses than high-value commodities like will be fruits and vegetables. And that's something that we also need to look at it carefully. When we start looking at the commodity differences and where to intervene, in this graph what we are showing at this point, the vertical bars that you see, these little colorful vertical bars refer to the different regions. So blue is Central and Southern Asia, red is Eastern and Southern East Asia, orange is Northern America and Europe, and green is Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's the median level that we observe, in this case, at the level of the regions for the level of food losses. Now, when we want to look at the different estimates, and there was a huge effort to do a meta-analysis to look at the range of the different estimates, we start looking at two things, the quartiles, the upper and the lower quartile, which is this box in the color, and we also look, of course, at the confidence interval. That's the minimum and the maximum, that horizontal line. Look at the level of variance we have across regions on the estimates we are observing. That calls our attention, okay? There is something that we need to do there. Why they are reporting such different levels of food losses across different regions in the different reports that have come out. So that we need to change. We need to have a common definition. We need to have a clear definition so that we can move forward, and that's the effort of what we're trying to do in this type of analysis. Now, why is this so important? Because reduction of food losses not only improve food security and nutrition by making food more available, it also helps us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by lowering the pressure on land and water, but also increase productivity and economic growth. A lot of employment that we are losing also when we are not using this food in the proper way. And all this is linked to different SDG indicators. The indicator for responsible consumption and production is indicator 12. That's where from the food losses sub-indicator is. But all the other elements of SDG 2, hunger, which is so central on food availability, on reducing natural resources and use of reduction of greenhouse emissions, are also indicators 13, 14, and 15, and improve productivity and economic growth, which is indicator 8. All the SDGs indicators are interlinked. We cannot treat them as silos. We need to link them, and that's the importance of bringing the food system approach into everything that we discuss when we try to achieve the SDG indicators. And clearly, food losses and waste play a crucial role into this. Now, what is the impact of the reduction on food security and nutrition? And here, the impact will vary depending on where we do the change. So what we have in this graph, the green bar shows lower prices, more disposable income for food and other goods. The orange bar shows, or line, shows demand shrinks and production falls and income is affected. Why? Because if we do the intervention at the end of the chain, when we are already in the waste side, that could affect our producers because there will be less demand, there will be more supply, of course, because I will be wasting less at the end, so I will have more food available, and that will affect the prices of the producers. So that will have a potential negative effect over income of the producers. But on the contrary, if we start bringing the solutions at the beginning of the value chain, at the production side, at the harvest side, at the post-harvest side, then our impact could be positive. We will create better results for the farmers and also for the consumers at the end of the line. So we need to be very careful, and one of the issues that this report tries to bring up is that we need to be very careful where we do the interventions in the value chain. Where are the hotspots where we need to minimize, and where is the most effective, cost-effective way to do it? It will be unfair to request a farmer, a smallholder, and I can give a very simple example of maize. I have two farmers, one in this area and the other one in that area. One of these farmers both of them grow maize. And both of them are facing losses because of a problem. But one of these farmers follows our advice and says, okay, I am going to do the drying, I am going to put the grain in the proper humidity level in the hermetic bag, and I will sell this to the market. The other farmer decides not to do it. That farmer has maize with aflatoxins because of the humidity. It's a fungus that we know creates liver cancer. Both goes to the market. The market doesn't recognize the change. They don't recognize the standard. And they pay exactly the same price for aflatoxin-free maize from maize with aflatoxin. Then what is the incentive for the farmer? Why he will do such investment? He will never follow our recommendations later. So again, the information needs to be clear. The standards need to be clear for us to make a change and for us to make a difference. And where we do it in the value chain, I think, plays a crucial role. The same applies for the reduction of emissions. In this graph, what we're trying to see is what is the carbon footprint of maize production along the supply chain. And as we expect, when we look at the farm, the storage, the processing, the wholesale retail, and the consumption, by all regions, always the footprint will be bigger at the end of the value chain. Because we already have gone through all the different phases of the value chain that create this level of emissions. So if I want to do an intervention with my target of reduction emissions, clearly I need to go at the end of the value chain and reduce waste. That's where I will get the biggest return. But if I want to be more careful in terms of the resources, the water, the land, clearly at the beginning of the value chain is where I will get the biggest return. So again, we need to carefully understand how different the effects are across the value chain. Of course, we want to be preventive too, no? And we want to prevent that emissions to happen by supplying the proper good. So again, it's very important to look carefully at the different elements and trying to see how we can reduce and be more effective depending on the objective we have in mind and what we want to achieve through the reduction of losses. What we are trying to bring here is what are the different strategies that we can do at the different country contexts and what can be done. When we look at upstream, for example, at the farm level, we know that reduction of losses will increase water quality, will reduce water scarcity, will preserve land, will create some income for the farmers, and also will increase food availability. On the downstream part of the consumer, as I said before, we will be able to reduce emissions at a bigger return. We will be able to reduce plastic use because of the packaging tools. We will increase the quality and nutritional food content if we have proper standards. We will increase food distribution, and we will reduce prices for consumers. So in different parts of the value chain, we could have differentiated impacts, and that's basically what we are trying to do through this analysis. And the report looks carefully to the different interventions and what has been the returns and the experience we have done. Also, there are differences according to the different regions. We know that in lower income countries with high levels of food insecurity, the strategy should be to focus to reduction of losses at the upstream level. On the contrary, when we have high income countries, the strategy should be to reduce losses at the end of the value chain at the downstream level, because that's where we are going to reduce more emissions. So again, we need to contextualize things to the type of country we are, to the commodities we are working, and to where we are going to get the biggest return for the investment we are going to do in the value chain. Now, what is the priority of AO? Basically, we want to close the information gap. We want to identify where in the value chain the problems are. We want to be able to track the performance of the indicator over time. We want to develop guidelines to help countries to collect data, but also to help countries to reduce losses. And we want to assist countries to identify critical loss points. That's the only way we can really increase the performance of this indicator. 14% is a very high number. It's approximately $400 billion in value. So it's a really important number. And if we want to achieve the SDG related to this indicator, and especially if we want to achieve SDG 2 and SDG 1, this is a topic where we can have win-win strategies. And that's where we need to put significant emphasis to be able to achieve what we are trying to look and what we are trying to achieve in the future. FAO is bringing, as part of this report, a significant call for better data. We are ready. We have deployed mechanisms and tools and guidelines to collect data in the countries. We have brought some of those into this report, but that needs to increase massively. We need to have clarity, detailed information, where in the value chain are the problems, so that we can implement policies. We cannot keep operating blindfold. We cannot operate in the dark if we want to achieve SDG 2. We need to open our eyes. We need to have proper information to be able to achieve it, and that's what we are aiming in this report. Let me finish by saying that all our data is now available online. That's the policy we are pushing in FAO, public data. In that link, which I will show in a second, you will be able to achieve and look at all the data, all the meta-analysis that was done by commodity, by country, to see all the information that we know today exists. And also, let me finish by saying that we are going to track accountability. It's not accountability only of FAO, what FAO does. It's also accountability of everybody else working in this topic. And there is a lot of people and a lot of initiatives in this topic. But up to now, they has not been tracked. And now we have a measure, we have a baseline, 13.8%, 14%. We can track the progress, and we can see if we are on track or not. And before finishing, let me just show you. This is the portal that we have now in place, where we have all the data. By the link I showed you before, you can access to it, and you will be able to look at all the information we have. So thank you very much, and we are here for answering any potential question.
Thank you very much. First of all, of course, I would like to congratulate the DG and FAO for this presentation, and even more for raising the bar for the issue on food losses and food waste. Because I think since 2011 we are speaking about it. We had 2015, we had an international UN conference in The Hague, where, by the way, we already had the same definition if you have now presented. And I think it's a matter of urgency. My question, two questions. First, I understand, of course, that FAO is not working alone in this field. You are working closely together with the World Resource Institute, as well as the Champions 12.3, and especially the World Resource Institute has already published the last 4 years facts and figures around the food losses and food waste? And could you give a view how they relate to your facts and figures? And secondly, of course, the World Bank. You're also working closely together with the World Bank. The World Bank is developing a global framework for food losses. How is that connected with this report? The second question is, the consequences of the reduction which we have to achieve are, of course, very severe, could be very severe for the farmers, because it's a very complex issue. And as long as you don't tackle also the political environment where the increase of food production will lead to also better markets and higher prices, you can have a vice versa situation. How can we avoid that? Thank you.
Because if you look at the report, there is a whole section of acknowledgements. And it's because the only way we can achieve this is working together. No? And we have been working with all the different colleagues as external advisors, as collaborators, but also as panel of experts. So for example, the World Bank has been part of our panel of experts, WRI, WFP, the CIR, IFAD, and so on and so forth. So I keep doing the list. The important thing for us is that to be able to achieve what we want to achieve, we need to work together. Now, the new framework of the World Bank, and we are collaborating closely with the person in charge of the bank, which is Gita Sethi, and also with you, in trying to come up ways in which we can do joint efforts to identify these hotspots and especially to identify all the potential impacts of the different interventions that we do and look at cost effectiveness of interventions. There is also a huge initiative with CERES 2030 that we are also working on, which brings a lot of partners. Alicia English is part of that too, David Laborde and IFPRI and many others which are part of that game. So there are many, many initiatives behind which we are linking to all of them because our idea is to work together, and that's where we are. But one of the ideas that we bring in the report is this continuum of the value chain. No? And what we were saying is that if you do the reduction at the end of the value chain on the waste side, you will have more food available, and that will affect prices for the farmers, of course. Not only that, we are looking very carefully at what is the cost effectiveness of the interventions. The example I give on maize is a clear example that you can make a farmer to do something which is not cost effective, although it's good for the global good, but it will affect him. Therefore, he won't be doing it again, and that breaks the sustainability. So we need to create the options to make decisions cost effective and also to open markets. Creating markets of standards, for example, of product differentiation by quality standards, is a way to do that, because consumers will value more a commodity which has a higher quality than a commodity that has a lower quality. And that's very important, and that's something else that we bring in this definition, which is the quality of the commodity.
In the report, we do outline the business case for loss reduction, and there are opportunities for the private sector to benefit, and this is something that is also pointed out by WRI, for example, in the report that they put out in August. One point that we also make is, in fact, this link where you need broader policies to make it profitable for the private sector, meaning that there are situations where maybe information is not fully available in the private sector, and there might be opportunities to reduce losses and be profitable, but mostly in a lot of situations the private sector is pretty well informed. So it is a question of the broader policy setting that can go from infrastructure in developing countries to type of food prices and broader policies that affect food prices more generally. So we're definitely in agreement with that, yes.
Let me add another thing which is, I think, important where the innovation could come up is that sometimes the technology for smallholders is not available. So we don't have technology which is scale neutral. And a good example of that is the drying technologies. Drying technologies have evolved enormously for large farmers, but not for small farmers. And that's where we need to do a change, because I could have the plastic hermetic bag. If I didn't dry the grain to the level I need to put it in the plastic hermetic bag, I could make the problem even worse. So it's very important also to bring the innovation into the game.